The other day, the other week, whenever it was, I'm not exactly sure, but some of you, perhaps, you're all probably too good to connect with the story. Can we stop the popping, please? Is it popping or is it only my ears? It's just the echo I'm hearing. Sorry, apologies. So the other day, or the other week, whenever it was, I'd had that week. How many of you know about that week? We don't have to give descriptions on that week, or that month, or that day, whatever. It's just that week. Like, it was busy, I was tired, I was exhausted. It was just that week, and then the phone rang at the end of the day. And I looked at the phone number, and I looked at the name, and I looked at it, and I did this. And I'm like, oh gosh. I did that because I'm like, I'm too tired, too exhausted, and whatever, right? And this is what I did. I looked at that, and I sighed. I'm like, really, it's this person. And then I got irritated and frustrated because I'm like, this isn't going to be 5 minutes. This is going to be a long time. Like, this is one of those moments. And I get that I'm your pastor. Maybe not your pastor, but I am a pastor. But I am, like, severely problematic. Like, I have problems in my life. Like, I am far from perfect, and I have struggles just like you. And so just like you, when you sometimes engage with those people, you have those frustrating moments where you're like, oh gosh, really? That person's ringing me like it was Chris all over again. It was not Chris. Chris doesn't do that. It's always a joy when Chris rings. When Chris rings, like, hey, how are you, my friend? It's beside the point. I, just like you, do that. And I imagine that you've had the same thing when you have that person that rings, or they turn up, and it's a friend, or it's a co-worker, it's a family member, that co-worker that just, they waddle into your office at such and such a time. It's not you, Chris. Every other day or a couple of times a week, or Monday is going to be a bad day because they're going to turn up and they're going to tell me all about the weekend and all the problems. You know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. You know what it is. We've all had that. And then, how many of you feel like doing this? That you convince yourself that this is what I'll do. If I tell them exactly what it is that they need to know, their problems will be solved. Right? You're like, and you feel like saying this, you're like, dude, do you realize that at the core of every problem, it's the same thing, and it's you? Or maybe it's not that. Be like, hey, if you just do this, that won't be a problem. Or like it's what have you. And some of you do that because, well, you like poking the bear, perhaps, or you love confrontation, so you do that. And then I know there's plenty of us that don't, even though we'd like to do it. We don't do it because we don't like confrontation, and we don't want to upset people. And like there's different groups. And we're not going to argue about whether it's right or wrong, but maybe to a degree we are. Because perhaps the question is this, right? So if we can just tell that person, whoever it is, you can think of your own individual person, if I can just tell them what it is that they need to know, everything will get better, because we've convinced ourselves of this. The way that we can fix people's problems is to tell them what they need to know. Like, if I can just convince them of the problem, if I can just convince them that it's insert blank, then they will be able to get better. Like, they'll be able to fix themselves. But the question is, when has this actively ever helped? Right? When has you highlighting, because I've done this and it's chiefly gone incredibly bad. If you want to know how not to do pastoral care, come and see me. I'll give you everything that you should not do. In fact, perhaps I'll even tell you what stories you should never share as the opening to your sermon as well, because everyone will think you're a bad pastor. All right, so as far as when, like, I have been that person that's like, hey, do you know what? Here's your problem. The problem is you. All the problems result, like, I have tried that approach, and like, honestly, yes, sometimes I've done it, and it's worked really well, but 98% of the time doing that, it never works, ever. Just trying to tell people, here's the problem, you need to do insert blank, and then the problem will be solved. It generally never works. And here's the interesting thing that I discovered, or I realized, is that as Christians, we believe this, that everyone needs to hear about Jesus. especially us as Pentecostal or evangelical Christians. We're convinced that everyone needs to hear about Jesus, and I'm convinced that that's the truth. That everyone needs to hear about Jesus because everyone needs to have a relationship with Jesus, because their life will get better when Jesus is involved in their lives. I'm convinced about that. But this is what I've also noted, is that the default to our evangelical program or happenings is to tell them what they need to know. It starts with the point of what they need to know. This is how I'm going to evangelize people. I'm going to tell them what they need to know. Here's what they need to know. That you are separated from God, that God died, or Jesus died to set you free from your sins so that you can be reconciled back to a relationship with God. Your problems are this. You just need Jesus in your life. Your problems, Courtney, you just need Jesus in your life. Michael says, amen. You just said there's nothing wrong with Courtney. Okay, nothing at all wrong with Courtney. I just decided not to pick on Chris. So you just need Jesus in our lives. And we start from this standpoint of we're just going to tell them what it is that they need to know. But the odd thing is, right, we know in life when a person has said problems, telling them what they need to know doesn't work. But we have this idea when we're trying to evangelize with people, we're convinced that if I tell them what they'll need to know, they're accepted and they'll change and they'll transform their lives. And so my thought is this. What if we've got evangelism / helping people backwards? We're doing it. We're wanting to connect with people. We're wanting to evangelize to people because we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to connect them to Jesus, but we've got it backwards because we're starting with the standpoint of, I'm going to tell them what it is that they need to know. But what if evangelism? What if helping people? What if the role of being a Christian, what if the role of us actively being the church started from a position a bit more like this, that we work towards making people's today better than their yesterday? That when they engage with me or when I engage with them, my focus isn't to just and only and lead from the standpoint of I'm going to tell them what it is that they need to know, but I'm going to engage with them in a way that makes their today better than their yesterday. That when people turn up and engage with the church, that their today becomes better than their yesterday, and so forth and so forth. That when they engage with me down the street, when I bump into that friend that I haven't seen for a while, that their today becomes better than their yesterday because they've encountered not just me, but they've encountered the presence of God in me. In fact, and that's what I want to encourage us with and talk about this morning, that I think the role of us as Christians, especially talking to Christians this morning. The role of us as Christians, it should be to evangelize. We should be sharing a good news message with people. We should be doing that. But that should not be the direct leader that's always going. The direct leaders that's always going should be this, that I'm working in such a way that makes their today better than yesterday. And then out of that place, I get to share with them an incredible good message about an incredible good God that loves them beyond what they could ever imagine. And I serve them in such a way that they're like, why? Why do you want to love me? I love you because insert blank, and you can join the dots. And so that's what I want to try and drop and highlight to us this morning, is like that I think evangelism, I think our role as Christians, that if we're a Jesus follower, this should be what our life looks like. That we're working as best we can to engage with the people around us, the Christians and the non-Christians, to make their day, to make their today better than their yesterday. So to do that, I want to take us through a story of Jesus and his disciples. And Jesus is good at this. The disciples not so good at this, because the disciples, they've kind of had, leading up to this story, they've had that day. They've had that week. They've had that month where they're tired, they're stressed, they're exhausted. There's been a lot happening. There's been a lot going on. And they're just wanting some time to check out, to unwind, to relax. They're wanting all of that. In fact, so the backstory to this is what has happened is Jesus has sent out his disciples ahead of him, and he sent them out on their own ministry voyage, and they've been going out and they're ministering to people, sharing with people about Jesus, praying for people, engaging with people, and they've just come back and they're exhausted, and Jesus is exhausted because it's being diligent, and they're kind of having that day just like you have sometimes, where the phone rings and you're like, my gosh, will it ever stop when people just keep turning up to the op shop? Even you're like, you never do that because you're too good. They're kind of having that day just like you and I have at times. And so this is the day that they're having, and it starts from Mark 6 from verse 31. It says, Jesus said to them, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest for a while because we have been busy, right? He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. You know those seasons, those moments where it's just hectic? For a lot of jobs and industries, that's kind of this time leading up to Christmas. It just becomes busy. Because you're trying to wind down, get everything closed up. And it can sometimes feel like it's just that busy. There's people coming, and I don't have time to eat. I'm not trying to minister to them. I'm just trying to do conveyancing work. Yeah? And then some of you are farmers. And this time of year is absolutely hectic. You're trying to get the hay done, then you're moving on to the grain. You're like, and it just doesn't stop. And it's like there's not people coming, but there's harvest coming. And I don't even have time to eat. It's one of those days. It's one of those seasons. All of us go through those seasons. And so Jesus is like, we're tired, we're busy, we're going to have some rest time. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. So they all jump in this boat and they left for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people did this. As they're getting in the boat, many people recognized them and saw them leaving. They saw them departing from the shore and heading across the lake. And people from many towns, they ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. And if you put yourself in the disciples' position, you've had that month, that day, that week, that what have you, you're done with people. And you're sitting there, and the boat pushes off and starts floating and heading, and it is the most relaxing feeling, isn't it? Like, think about it. It's just like, oh gosh, it's behind me. You know when holiday hits, and it's been this just major, intense grind to get through, and then holiday hits, you're like, oh. And it's not, oh, like that person's ringing, like, my gosh, this is so nice. The first day of holidays, it's one of the boat has pushed off, the worries of the world are behind me, and they are sailing. And you throw a rod over the side, and you're enjoying it. You're enjoying the journey, and you're just relaxing because you're like, I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to think about anyone. I don't have to think about doing anything for the next X. We're just going to unwind. We're going to have some nice food. We're going to have some nice time. It's going to be relaxing. And then you're sitting there. And then out of the corner of your eye, you see a flash. It's out in the distance, but you see something and you kind of glance, and there's movement, but you glance back and you're like, whatever. And then you look back and you see it again. You think, surely not. Surely not. And so you turn to the person in the boat next to you. You're like, did you see that over there? Like, yeah, but I'm ignoring it. I'm pretending that's not happening. And then you tap the person next door to you again, but they're asleep and they wake up. Did you see? And they're like, no, I haven't seen that. Then they look over and then they become white. And then you start communicating with one another, like, what's going to happen? We're meant to be having rest time, and I'm pretty sure that those people are, yes, they are. Look, there's another group of people. They're already at the jetty. They're already there waiting to engage, and you're like, my gosh. But you think it's okay because Jesus is tired too. Jesus is tired as well, so it's going to be fine. This is what he'll do. He will direct the ship or the boat to move, to go to another jetty, and we'll avoid these people. It's going to be fine. But he doesn't. Jesus just keeps the boat direct, sailing straight for that jetty, straight for all those people, straight for the crowds. And you can imagine, like, if we brought this into today's time, there would be flags, there'd be cheering, there'd be microphones, there'd be music, there'd be confetti. And as they're getting closer, it's getting louder and louder, and they're like, nah. These people. But they think to themselves, because this is what I would think, that surely Jesus will get out of the boat And Jesus will be like, it'll be 5 minutes, we'll kiss a few people, we'll shake some hands, we'll take some photos, then we're going to go to the hotel. And we're going to unwind, and it's going to be relaxing, and then it's going to be good. I get there's no hotels here, but you know what I'm saying. That's their assumption, but that's not what. If you know the story, which most of you probably do, that's not at all what happens. In fact, the complete opposite happens. This is what happens. Jesus saw the crowd, the huge crowd, as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them. So Jesus steps out of the boat. He walks a couple of steps, engages with the first person. He starts listening to their story, and he hugs them and loves them, and moves to the next person. And it's a similar thing. He hugs them and loves on them. And then this person's crying, so he embraces her and loves her and prays over her and blesses her. And then there's a kid here, and then there's a guy there. And this goes on, and the disciples think, my gosh, it started all over again. This has been the last XYZ weeks, and we've been tired and busy, and there's all people, and now there's people again. And can't we just tell them their problems and what they need to know so we can just get on with enjoying our rest? But Jesus jumps out of the boat, and he has what we should have, and that is compassion. That is a compassion that Jesus ends up working in such a way that he's engaging with the people that are right in front of him to do his part to try and make their today better than their yesterday. The thing with compassion is that you cannot have compassion without empathy. You can't have compassion without empathy. Empathy is the birthing place of compassion. In fact, compassion is birthed as a response to empathy. And empathy being this. Empathy is when you feel what someone else feels. You feel their pain, you feel their hurt, you feel their brokenness. And you nearly feel it as though you're connected to them. And you can pick up on their emotions and I know that you're not literally feeling their hurt or their what have you, but there's this sense that emotionally you're connecting and engaging with them in such a way that I can feel the hurt that is going on inside of them as they're sharing the story. It's welling up, it's doing something in my heart. I can feel their brokenness, their hurt, their etc. I can feel that, I can sense that. Compassion is what we do when we feel this sense of empathy. Compassion ultimately is this. Like empathy is the sense or the emotion that I'm connecting on an emotional level. The compassion is me or us or you moving to actively try and bridge a gap or try and bring something along that can help soothe and heal that hurt, that pain, that suffering, or what they're going through as far as you're trying to bring a resolve. Compassion is birthed as a response to empathy. Compassion should do this. Compassion moves you, or it should move you to make people's today better than their yesterday. Compassion should move you to do something. It should start with this sense of empathy, that I feel empathetic towards someone, and then out of that, I move with compassion to do something, and that action looks like this. I'm going to try and do my part to make their today better than their yesterday. Not just stop at telling them what it is that they need to know. I'm going to do something practically to help them, practically to love them. Bill Bullard, author, says it like this. He says, opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. He says, it requires no accountability and no understanding. Opinion. We're great at opinion. An opinion on why they are the way that they are. Opinion as why they're in the position that they're in. We're good at this because what we can do with opinion is we can justify the response that we want to outwork. We can justify how much we love them, how much we care for them, how much we serve them. We can justify that based on the opinion that we determine of them, around them. We're good at this, and it requires no accountability and understanding. We don't seek to try and understand anything. We don't seek to try and understand what's going on in their life. We don't try and understand why they feel pain, why they feel hurt, why they feel broken. We just come to an opinion because we've got an idea and there's no accountability. So this is what we do. We get a truth bomb, drop a truth bomb, and then leave. Here's the truth. Here's the reality. This is what you need to do to change. Here's your problems. This is what's going on. This is why that person's the way they are. It's just a truth bomb that justifies our escape. If you're a Christian, bring it to us for a second, you've probably experienced this perhaps literally, or you've seen it play out. As far as people outside the church do this to people inside the church. Some of you will have had this, that you will have been called a homophobe, a bigot, and et cetera, and insert all those different things. You will have been called that due to your faith. You will have heard of people calling that because of your faith, with the idea that what they've come with an opinion, and they've dropped the truth bomb according to themselves of insert blank about you, without trying to understand why it is that you have the opinion that you do, or you believe what it is that you do. They drop a truth bomb. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You know the flip side? We've done the same thing. And we do the same thing consistently. We do this with different people groups. We do this with people that we deem below us, or they're in that insert blank category because of. And so what's that is, that's a truth bomb that we've just dropped that means we don't have to try and understand why they're there, and it provides no accountability. We do this, the same thing with the demographics of people that we completely disagree with. As Christians, we do this with anyone that we deem a sinner, anyone that falls into our pet sin. And a lot of the time for the church, that looks like the LGBTQ plus people, or people engaged in sexual sin of any kind. This is what we do. We come and we drop our truth bomb, whether rightly or wrongly, without trying to understand. And it is the lowest form of human knowledge. But Bill continues on. He says the highest form of knowledge is empathy. Because this is what empathy does. For it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. What it's not trying to do is justify and say another's world is right. What it's trying to do, what empathy is trying to do, is trying to understand what it is that another is going through, so we can work out how I can actively love them. But this is what we do so often. It's so often to form an opinion of, insert blank, about this individual, because we'd rather justify our position to maybe not do anything, to maybe do very little. And we do it like this. We come up with all sorts of things. I've done this. Some of you will have done this, as far as they've done it to themselves. Anyone made that example like, hey, I'm not going to help them. I don't need to help them. They did it to themselves. They're in that position because they did it to themselves. That's their problem. Their problem, they need to find a solution for themselves. Like, hey, if they had have been wise with their money, they wouldn't be in that situation. They did it to themselves. If they didn't spend that much time with that person from the office, from the opposite sex, and wind in this like really messy situation, like they've done it to themselves. I don't need to do anything, nor should I. They've done it to themselves. Or like, you know what, I'm just too drained to care. I'm too drained to help. I'm too drained to help these people. I'm just too drained to do it. Or they should just toughen up. I've had it hard in my life. They should just toughen up. They should just get on with it. I've had it difficult. They can have some hard yards. And you know what? It's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for them to deal with some hard realities in their life. Or they just need to get over it. That's their problem. If they've got a problem, that's theirs. They just need to get over it. It's not got nothing to do with me. Or if I'm too nice, they might not change. If I'm too nice, they may not change. And in fact, they may not change, and they might abuse my generosity. We come to opinions that void us of accountability. And this is exactly what I think the disciples are doing. This is exactly what I think the disciples are doing. Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the nearby farms and villages to buy something to eat." And maybe I'm giving too harsh a critique of the disciples, but I think this is what's going on in the back of their minds. They're here because they chose to be here. I never asked them to be here. They didn't need to follow us a ridiculous journey around the lake and get here to where there's no food stalls or markets or anything like that. That is their problem. And I think what the disciples are doing is they're doing a couple of things. Like, hey, that was their choice. That was their decision to be here. We need to send them away so they can help themselves. I think that's what the disciples are pushing back with, and they're suggesting we need to do something. Like, we need to buy something for them to eat. But Jesus, he pushes back, and I think he pushes back because he sees what it is that they are saying behind what it is that they are saying. So he says, you feed them. We're not going to send them away. You feed them. And I think this is what he's saying is, guys, you have been out ministering for the last XYZ period of time. And if you think ministry is all about just ticking boxes or engaging with people is all about ticking boxes, you've completely missed it. We're meant to be here serving people, loving people, helping people, caring for people. In fact, people, he's saying, people aren't a project to save, they are a person to serve. And what Jesus is trying to point out to them is, if you think ministering to people is all about just trying to get them to say a prayer, engage in insert blank, you've completely missed it. We're here to serve people. In fact, we're here to try and serve them in such a way to make their today better than yesterday. When these people turn up, they're a frustration, they're an irritation, Jesus is saying, and I agree that they are. But we're here to serve them in such a way that makes their today better than yesterday because they engaged with us. Today, better than yesterday. And they end up pushing back, just like I would, just like what you would when Jesus says, will you feed them? Like, with what? What do I feed them with? I didn't prep for this. I didn't plan for this. I wasn't thinking through this. When we jumped in the boat, this wasn't what we're thinking about. None of that. And so, like, we'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy all the food for these people. And like, hey, Jesus, just so you know, since we've been with you, we haven't been working. So we don't have money. We don't have money to be able to invest in them. We can't do this. Jesus looks at the disciples. And he tells them, like, have the people sit down in groups. And I think I've jumped through a thing. He says this. He looks at them and he says, how much bread do you have? How much bread do you have? He's not asking, do you have enough to feed everyone? Do you have enough to do everything? He's just like, how much do you have? How much do you have? And they responded. They go through and they do an investigation, they do a count, and they go through one another, like all of the 12, and they work out, well, we've got a couple of fish, and we've got 5 loaves of bread. That's all we've got. Jesus is all we brought on the boat with us, and that's for us. That's for our downtime. That's for us. And so what Jesus ends up doing, he gets everyone to sit down in groups of 50, everyone. He grabs the bread, and he grabs the fish, and he breaks it, and then he distributes it to the people. He distributed it amongst everyone, just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He hands it out everywhere. And the disciples watch this take place. They're a part of this. They're eating as well. They're enjoying themselves as well. And it says this, that they all ate as much as they wanted. And afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. And it's nearly like this comical way. I'll come back to that point in a minute. They pick up all this stuff after they've fed everyone, because they've all worked in a way to make today better than yesterday. In other words, it's like Jesus is trying to highlight to them in this story that your role to connect with people isn't just to tell them what it is they need to know, but to love them how it is they need to be loved. And you do that by trying to make their today better than yesterday. How could you do that today? You just need a little bit. It doesn't matter what you have. You just need a little bit of something, and give it to me and let me do the rest. Actively trying to make today better than yesterday with this idea. They only had a little bit, but if you have the ability, you have the responsibility. If you have the ability to help, if you have the ability to love, if you have the ability to make a small difference, if you have the ability to make a large difference, if you have an ability to make a dent in the difference, then you have the responsibility to be a part of doing something. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to highlight to the disciples. Like, hey, you guys have only got a little bit, but you give me a little bit and I'll do an incredible amount more. And it's not about if you've got enough to do everything. It's about you coming to the party and actually being a part of the solution of trying to engage with people and love people and serve people and honor people and value people, because that's what I came to do. How grand the help is, how much the help accomplishes has nothing to do with you. That's God's job. Your job is to help where you can with what you can. Our job isn't to try and come up with grandiose things, grandiose amounts that accomplish absolutely anything and everything. Our job is to do what we can, where we can, with what we can. Actively, deliberately, purposefully, engaging with people consistently in a way that makes it today better than yesterday. Can I have that back, please? So the question could be, how can we do this? And I pondered with like having this on my arm the whole time and annoying you. Because I was like, that's going to be too distracting for me to preach with this here. But this is a red bag, right? And I came up with all sorts of grandiose ideas on how to drop this as an idea, and it could be this, like, you know what you can do this week? I'm going to give you permission to bag someone out. And I thought about as many of you would laugh as you did, so I'm like, I'm not going to do it. But like, that's right. How can I do that? How can I help? How can I actively try and engage in such a way that makes some kind of a difference? And it could be simply this: red bags. Red bags. If you don't know what the red bags are an initiative that we have done via our op shop for, I don't know, how long, Evie? Do you know? It's not 17 years, but it wouldn't be far off it. How long? Oh, is it only 5 years? We're doing it before Dame on Tanya left. Yeah, it's beside this point. It's a long time. So the idea of this is like our, what should we call it? Our Christmas drive appeal. Where we're actively trying to make someone's today, and in particular the today that we're talking about with this, is better than their yesterday, being Christmas, is better than yesterday. Because I don't know how many of you are aware, but I'm assuming that all of you are aware, but in case you aren't, let me fill you in on something that for plenty of families, plenty of people, they wake up Christmas morning, and Christmas is no different than the day before. Not because they don't want it to be, because they can't afford it to be. For some of these people that live in that existence, they're your next door neighbor and you don't know it. They're the person that's serving you at the supermarket and you don't know it. They're the person, they're the family that you go to school with and you don't know it. You don't need to know it. You don't have to know it. But this is what happens every Christmas morning for multitudes of families in Echuca Moama, not including the rest, just Echuca Moama, is that kids wake up Christmas morning with no presents to open. Kids wake up with no special breakfast to have. Families have nothing special to share over lunch or dinner with just a couple of close friends. And it's not about to make it extravagant. It's just about to make today a little bit better than yesterday. Every Christmas, there's a plethora of people in our community that can't have a celebration, not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford to. And this is what so many of us end up doing. We end up forming an opinion of why they're like that. Well, if they did insert blank, they wouldn't be like that. We come up with truth bombs and drop truth bombs and just leave. But Jesus' example, I think, is something different. Jesus' example is an example of, hey, you know what? Our job isn't to judge people. Our job isn't to just tick boxes. Our job is to work in such a way that we strive to make someone's today a little bit better than yesterday. And my gosh, if we can make Christmas a whole lot better than the Christmas before, we've done a good job. It may not be the end of the job that we're doing, but it's some kind of a job. But we spend so much time and energy focusing on who deserves and who doesn't deserve. And once we do that, we've completely missed the point. The point should be this: when your energy goes into judging others rather than loving them, you lose sight of what following Jesus is truly about, which is making today better than yesterday. If you are a Jesus follower, when people engage with you, their day should brighten. If you're a Jesus follower and someone engages with you at the supermarket, their day should brighten. I walked into the op shop the other day and I was so tired. And I walked in and you know how you're just on a mission sometimes? Yeah, you're just on a mission. Do you know that when you're on a mission sometimes, what do? You walk. Are you guys asleep? No. You're on a mission and you walk with purpose. Here's the thing, I didn't notice the door opened. I just thought, I was like Jesus and I walked through the door. I didn't notice that the door was open. I was so tired. And this isn't me justifying. I was not thinking anything like that, and I just kept walking. And in the back of my mind, I thought I heard someone say, "Thank you." And I realized that I'd walked through the door, gone round the corner and the corridor, and kept going. And someone had opened the door, held the door for me, and I just completely left them. Imagine if they knew I was the pastor of this church. Potentially they do. Right? I didn't. And I know it's a simple thing, but I just made that person's day gloomier. Right? I just made that person's day gloomier. It's a simple thing. It's only small. But we should be working, living, engaging with people in such a way that their day gets brighter because we've been involved in it, because they've engaged in us. Not because we're necessarily anything special, but because we've got the presence of the King within us, the presence of Jesus, and that should develop and bring something out of other people, and that is this presence of joy. And so this is what following Jesus is about, I think. It is about making today better than yesterday. And with this idea that we're constantly focusing on a 180s change, right? If I engage with people and maybe I can say this, do this, or help here, I can get a 180-degree change in their life. But what happens? Or what if evangelism is a bit more like this? Loving them in such a way they just shift by 2 degrees. Because 2 degrees today isn't a big difference. But if those paths keep going on, that 2 degrees looks like a completely different person in a period of time. But we get so fixated on what the end result looks like, we forget to love people in the moment. So why don't we do this? Red bags. Red bags are one way that we're making today better than yesterday. And you guys are creative people. You'll come up with really creative ideas on how that you can actively love and care and serve people and make their today better. But this is what you could do. And this is what I'd suggest you do, especially leading up to this Christmas. That you grab one of these. The Sage came up with a good idea that I'll share in a second. But what you do is you just spend a little bit longer in the supermarket when you're there, and you put some items in here. I can't remember what there's a shopping list in them. Is that correct, Evie? Yes. Is there a dollar amount? No, it's just a suggestion. What Sage said to me is, sure, it can add up to a little bit of money. Like $50 or something? Sometimes. It depends on what you get, right? It can add up to $50. We're not asking you to do all 50 at once. This is what Sage suggested. You could do this. Grab this red bag every time you go shopping and add another couple of items into it every single time. And then when you finish, you drop it off to the op shop. Right. And then what we're going to do, because the cutoff is the 17th of December, is that correct? 18th of December. The cutoff is 18th of December. We are going to distribute it to people in our community with the aim of trying to make today better than yesterday for them, their Christmas better than the Christmas before. And I don't necessarily expect that we're going to do that. And all of a sudden, we're going to see all these people in church because we gave out all these red bags. But this is what I believe and I hope, and this is what we contend for. That it just might open the doors for someone to have a conversation with them. Yeah. That somewhere down the track, that someone loved me enough to do something. Someone loved me enough to do something, so I'm going to ask a question of someone, or they engage with someone that they discover is a Christian or a believer, and so they start asking questions. Imagine this. Imagine this Christmas. Instead of just people hearing about Jesus' love, people in need in our community feel it. Feel it through a red bag. Where we actively try and make someone's today better than yesterday. The point I was going to make before, what I admire about this story is there's 12 baskets of leftovers. For those of you that went to Bible school, Bible Sunday school, Epic Kids, we call it Epic Kids, probably when you were there, apart from you guys, it was called something else. We'll go with Sunday school. If you went to Sunday school, or you go to Bible college, or you're a Bible student, or you've been in church for long enough, you'll probably realize this, that there's 12 apostles, or there's 12 disciples of Jesus. There's 12 of them. And I find it so fascinating that 12 baskets gets picked up, and there's 12 people. And it was 12 people that came to Jesus and said, we don't have enough. We don't have enough, but yet 12 people gathered 12 baskets of leftovers, one for each of them. One for all of them. And it's nearly like it's this comical way of Jesus reminding them, you don't have to do it all. You just have to make it start and allow me to do the rest. You may not, and you do not, and we do not have the ability to solve every problem of every person in this community. But what we can do is we can do something with what we've got, and that's start with something and honor God enough to do something with a small amount. To do something with a small amount. God isn't asking you to feed 5,000. He's just asking you to bring your 5 loaves and 2 fish. He's asking you to bring what you have, not what you wish that you had. Just bring enough to start. Just bring enough to start. The reason we want to do that is for this reason. Because somewhere in our community, that might be your next door neighbor. That might be the kid you go to school with. There might be your office worker. There's someone in our community, somewhere in our community, someone's tomorrow needs to be better than they're today. How about you stand? Let me pray for you. Father, it's so easy to just get busy with our day and overlook people. Just get busy at the supermarket and not notice people. Get busy in our jobs. God, it's easy to get irritated with people, to get frustrated with people. Because people at times can be needy and everything like that. And it's easy to be just overwhelmed with the burdens of the problems, or feel ill-equipped or whatever it is. And God, I realize that I do that, and I'm not trying to preach at people per se. I'm equally trying to preach to myself, because I'm an equal problem in this, of just going about my time and not noticing. God, I'm guilty just as much as the next person of coming with the opinions and dropping truth bombs and making an excuse and leaving, and not actively being your hands and feet and wanting to engage and help and serve and love and connect with people. I'm guilty of that. And so God, I want to pray for all of us, God. Confront us. Jesus, those of us that have put our hands up to say that I want to follow you, God, confront us. Confront us on how we love people. Confront us on the way that we love people. And Jesus, I want to pray that your confronting doesn't lead to condemnation, Jesus, but it leads to an outworking of compassion, Father. An outworking of compassion for the people around us, Jesus. God, open our eyes to be able to see them in the same light that you see them, so that when we get out of our figurative boat, God, that we don't see irritations in front of us, but we see people in the same light that you saw them when you got out of the boat and you engaged with them and you loved them, Father. God, I want to pray that you embolden us to do what it is with a little bit that we have, knowing this, that I may not have enough to fix every problem, but you do incredibly more than we could ever imagine when we hand what we have over to you and allow you to move through it. And so, God, as we take red bags, as we fill red bags, as we distribute red bags, God, I want to be believing that it's the biggest filling of red bags that we've ever had. I want to pray that it's such a filling of red bags that there's red bags left over because there's no one else to give them to. But God, be it the biggest filling of red bags that we've ever had. And as they go to the people in the community, it brightens their day and lets them know that someone thought of them, that someone loved them, that someone is contending for them, and that person chiefly is you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, everyone loves coffee. If you don't like coffee, you probably like tea. If you don't like that, there's water. But hey, don't rush off. Head out, grab a tea or coffee, engage with one another, and celebrate with Evie. 17 years. 17 years in the op shop. Not necessarily you just in the op shop, but of the op shop. Hey, head out, grab a tea or coffee, be engaging with one another, and we'll see you all back here next week.